Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear. In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and it's what we'll remember in the end. My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer.
Alan Wake. After being in development hell for years, the team behind the Max Payne games, Remedy Entertainment, have finally released the much-hyped Alan Wake for the 360. Categorizing itself as a psychological thriller in the same vein as Twin Peaks and The Outer Limits, Wake attempts to string together an episodic narrative into a compelling mystery, and succeeds with only a slight few mistakes against it. Vacationing in the small town of Bright Falls with his wife Alice, the eponymous Alan Wake hopes to get away from his failed attempts to write a new book. After an argument with his wife, Alan suddenly finds himself in a car wreck, with his wife nowhere to be seen. Stranger still are the local townspeople being taken over by a supernatural dark force, and the remnants of a manuscript scattered all throughout the area that Alan apparently wrote but has no memory of ever writing. Further still, whatever's written on the manuscript has, or will, happen. Mysteries are abound in Alan Wake, and the story's episodic approach properly bookends each segment of the story, always leaving you wanting to know more. What's interesting to note is the game's casting away frights in favor of tension, as the manuscript coming to life mechanic allows the player to know what's going to happen, but never lets on when it's going to happen. In doing so, the game isn't as scary as it pretends to be, but in turn, it is one of the most suspenseful games currently available. If you go into Alan Wake expecting to be scared witless, suffice it to say you're going to be disappointed. However, the game's mood, atmosphere, and mystery easily makes up for its lackluster scares. On the surface, Alan Wake is your typical horror game as you fight possessed townspeople and inanimate objects, but there's a much appreciated twist of lighting that plays heavily in combat. Enemies are invulnerable to attacks, unless the darkness that shields them is banished with light. What could have been boring and tedious combat is instead an exercise in anxiety, waiting for your flashlight to cut through the enemy's darkness. The relationship between light and dark also plays in the weapons themselves. Flares provide you ample room in case you get surrounded, and flashbangs and flare guns are devastating tools in fights. At times, the game hamstrings you in combat by having enemies cheap-shot you from off-camera, and the dodge button they provide you with is also the same button you use to sprint with, so it's difficult to get Alan to dodge when you want him to. Though combat is the majority of what you do in Alan Wake, it isn't the only thing you'll be doing. There are a few environmental puzzles for you to wade through, but they're hardly brain teasers, and there's also a fair amount of collecting involved in the game. From manuscript pages, television and radio shows, coffee thermoses, and canned pyramids, there are quite a few tasks open for the achievement hunters out there. There's also a few context-sensitive QuickTime events, but they're very few and far in between, and don't factor too much into the overall game. Finally, there are driving segments that seem quite honestly out of place for a linear game like this. The environments are open enough to allow exploration on foot, but when you get into a car, the game feels restrictive, never giving you the freedom that driving in a car should come with. The cars are also very stiff to control and drive, but these are not game-breaking criticisms. As stated before, the mood and atmosphere is pitch perfect in Alan Wake. The cinematic shift between the safe and comforting light to the sinister darkness is all the more harrowing with its expertly used score and ambient sounds. For a game that revolves around using light as a weapon, it's thankful to see Wake's lighting physics being top-notch, only matched by its also top-shelf fog physics. Although, it's unfortunate to note that the actual character models and animations aren't up to par with the rest of the game's presentation. Facial animations are stiff and jarring, cars sort of herk and jerk their way along roads, and it's all topped by embarrassingly bad lip-syncing. The voice acting itself is nothing too special, each actor doing a passable job bringing their respective character to life, but the actors' efforts are marred by the horrendous lip-syncing.
Shh, baby, just another nightmare. Everything's fine. You dozed off.
Right. Anything more than dozed off would be news for everyone.
Cheer up, handsome. We're here.
Also, if you're going to play the game with an HD connection, be aware that the game's native resolution will cause some pixelation. Despite its graphical hiccups, Alan Wake is a superb example of a narratively driven game. There's little else to the game outside of the main story, which can be completed in about 8 to 10 hours. Though there is planned downloadable content, it won't be made available until late July, so if you're planning to buy Wake, you might want to sit on that for a while. If you're only looking for a fun weekend rental with a strong single-player campaign though, then Alan Wake will prove to be a wise and memorable investment.